This happened just a few weeks ago. I'm 34 and have always loved hiking. It's my way of escaping the chaos of daily life. I'm an environmental scientist, so I know a good bit about plants and animals. On that day, I wanted to check out a less frequented trail. The morning was crisp, and the leaves were turning beautiful shades of orange and red. At first, everything seemed normal. I filled my backpack, grabbed my gear, and set off down the path. I'd never stopped thinking about that day. As I hiked deeper into the woods, I heard this odd rustling. It was faint at first, but seemed to follow me. I thought maybe it was just some small animal. Then it got louder. My heart began to race. I turned around a few times, searching for something, anything that could explain it. The trees all looked the same. I shook it off, telling myself it had to be nothing. After a while, I noticed something strange on the ground. There were stones arranged in a way that felt off. It didn't seem natural. I got curious and knelt down to take a closer look. My skin prickled as I touched one of the stones. In that moment, I felt like I was being watched. I quickly stood back up. A chill ran down my spine. I pushed forward, trying to laugh it off. But every time I heard the rustling, or even a soft crack of a twig, I felt my stomach drop. Not long after, I spotted markings on the trees. They were carved into the bark in strange patterns. I felt uneasy, but I kept hiking. Maybe I'd just turn back soon. I glanced at my watch and noticed the sun was creeping lower. Suddenly, just at the corner of my eye, I saw something flash between the trees. I turned my head, but there was nothing. I rubbed my eyes, blaming fatigue, but it felt like more than just a trick of the light. The atmosphere began to change. The air felt heavier. Shadows in my periphery began to look like shapes. I felt a cold shiver. I should have listened to myself. Something was wrong. I could hear whispering now, soft and eerie. Maybe I was just imagining it. I turned around, deciding to leave before it got darker. I hurried back down the trail, but the rustling was still there, persistent, like a shadow. As I reached the path's end, my heart was racing. I felt a final chill wash over me. I heard a voice, quiet and distant. "Why are you here?" it asked. I wanted to scream, but I didn't turn around. I just hurried home, terrified and confused. I didn't know if what I experienced was real or just my mind playing tricks on me. All I knew was that I would never hike that trail again. The mountains felt alive that day, and the whispers still echo in my head. The days that followed were restless. I couldn't shake off what happened in the woods. Back at my desk, surrounded by papers, I glanced out the window, the mountains looming in the distance. I felt a pull to go back, to confront what had terrified me. Maybe there was an explanation. After all, I was a scientist. I needed facts. So, one weekend, I gathered my gear again. This time, I planned to take my friend Mike with me. He had a sense of humor that often took the edge off my anxiety. "What's the worst that could happen?" he laughed as we drove to the trailhead. I tried to match his lightheartedness, but I felt the weight of uncertainty in my chest. As we began hiking, the sun bathed the trees in warm light. I wanted to be a brave scientist, unfazed by the whispers of the unknown. I pointed out the strange patterns on the trees to Mike, trying to sound casual. "Do you think there's some sort of animal markings?" I asked, hoping he'd brush it off. He squinted at the bark, shrugging. "Could be, or just some bored hikers looking to make their mark." I forced a smile. "Yeah, sure. Let's go deeper." We continued along the trail, but the deeper we went, the more my nerves started to fray. The rustling noises returned, just as I remembered. I could feel my heart racing. Mike noticed my unease. "What's up? You look like you've seen a ghost." "Just the wind," I said, too quickly. Then, everything changed. We reached a clearing, and in the center lay a pile of stones, identical to the ones I had seen weeks ago. Instinctively, I stepped back. A chill ran down my spine. "Mike, look at this." He approached, squatting down to examine the stones. "It's just a weird pile of rocks," he said casually. But I saw his smile fade when he noticed the strange carvings on the stones, too. I felt the forest grow quieter. The air felt charged, like before. No more rustling, just silence. That's when I heard it again, the whispering. It was closer now, clearer. The words slid through the trees like a predator closing in. "Why are you here?" My voice caught in my throat. I turned to Mike, but he stood frozen, staring into the trees. "Did you hear that?" he asked, face pale. Before I could respond, a shadow darted between the trees. My blood ran cold. This wasn't just in my head. "We need to go," I said, grabbing his arm. We bolted back toward the trail, but the path seemed different. The familiar route was lost in a maze of trees. I looked back, and for a second, I could have sworn I saw shapes moving among the branches. Panic surged in me. I shouted, "Just keep moving!" Each footfall echoed our fear. We stumbled over roots and brambles, desperate to escape. Finally, we broke through the trees and onto the trail's edge. Gasping for breath, we turned to look back, heart pounding. The forest stood still, as if nothing had happened. I wouldn't have believed it if I hadn't felt it myself. That's when I noticed something sticking out from the ground near the trail. I approached it, and my stomach twisted. It was another stone, smaller but with the same strange markings. I picked it up, and a chill passed through me. There was something wrong about this place. I turned to Mike, whose face mirrored my fear. "We need to tell someone about this," he said slowly, his voice shaky. Just before I could respond, I felt a heavy presence in the air, one that left me with a dreadful sense of being watched. I was about to suggest leaving when I heard the whisper again, louder, more demanding. "Why are you still here?" My heart raced. I dropped the stone, and without a word, we ran back toward our car, hoping to escape the unseen eyes of the woods. I couldn't shake off the feeling that whatever we had stumbled upon wanted to keep us there. And I had to know more. We reached the car breathless, adrenaline still surging through our veins. I fumbled with the keys, my hands shaking as I tried to get the engine to turn over. Mike leaned against the vehicle, his face a mix of confusion and fear. "What the hell just happened?" he asked, looking over his shoulder at the tree line behind us, as if expecting something to emerge. "I don't know," I admitted. "But something isn't right. We need to report it." As I drove down the winding road, the shadows of the trees pressed in around us, their dark outlines flashing past. The whisper still echoed in my mind. Questions raced through my thoughts. What did it mean? Why were we there? When we reached town, I made a beeline for the local ranger station. I burst through the door, startling the ranger behind the counter. "We need to talk," I blurted, urgency spilling from my voice. The ranger raised an eyebrow. "What's going on?" I explained everything, from the strange markings on the stones to the bizarre whispering. The ranger listened, and as I spoke, his expression changed from casual interest to something serious. "Have you heard of the legends surrounding those woods?" he asked, his voice low. I nodded slowly. "I heard some stories, but just old tales. People have reported strange occurrences for decades. Missing persons, odd sounds, all linked to that forest," he said, leaning in closer. "Some say it's an old Native American site, sacred ground. Others believe it's a place for something darker." Mike shifted uncomfortably beside me, arms crossed tightly. "You can't be serious." The ranger met Mike's eyes. "I'm not saying you should go back. I'm just telling you what I've heard." He hesitated, then handed me a worn pamphlet. "If you're determined to investigate, take this. It lists some of the local legends and people who've experienced things out there." I took it, feeling the weight of his words. "Thanks," I muttered, suddenly feeling heavy with doubt. As we left the station, the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows in the fading light. I couldn't shake the feeling that we hadn't seen the last of whatever it was in those woods. We drove back in silence. A sense of dread hung between us. Once home, My thoughts spiraled. I knew I needed to return, but now a sense of urgency accompanied my desire. What if there was something I needed to uncover? Later that night, after Mike left, I spread out the pamphlet on my kitchen table. The stories were unsettling, talking about ancient rituals and the spirits that guarded the forest. One that particularly caught my eye was about a group of hikers who vanished without a trace, their last known location marked by an unusual stone formation. That's when I saw it. A small note tacked in the corner of the pamphlet hinted at a specific spot deep in the forest, a place said to be alive with ancient energies. My heart raced. It was the very same area we had stumbled upon. I knew I couldn't ignore it. I had to go back. Just when I began to formulate a plan, a loud crash broke the silence of my home. It echoed through the hallways, drawing my attention. My breath caught in my throat. Someone was in the house. I held my breath, straining to listen. A shuffling sound came from the living room. My heart pounded loudly in my ears. I grabbed a kitchen knife from the counter, hoping it would offer some protection. "Hello?" I called out, forcing my voice to remain steady. I didn't expect an answer, but I needed to sound brave. The last thing I wanted was to be the next missing person. Silence. Then another noise. Footsteps, slow and deliberate. They echoed against the hardwood floor. I stepped carefully out of the kitchen, every nerve in my body screaming for me to run. I peeked around the corner. The living room was dimly lit by the streetlight seeping through the window, and I could see the outlines of the furniture. Nothing seemed out of place, but that didn't ease my tension. I inched closer, knife gripped tightly in my hand. Just as I reached the doorway, the sound stopped. I felt frozen, caught between the urge to confront whatever was in my house and the primal instinct to flee. With a sudden rush of bravery, I flipped on the light switch. The bright glow flooded the room, and I scanned every corner. My heart sank when I saw it, a small figure crouching behind the couch. "Who's there?" I shouted, voice shaking. The figure turned, and my heart dropped. It was a boy, maybe 10 years old, with wide eyes filled with terror. I blinked in disbelief. "Please don't hurt me," he whimpered, clutched a stuffed animal to his chest. "Where did you come from?" I stammered, taking a cautious step back. "What are you doing here?" "I'm lost," he said, trembling. "I ran away from the bad man." Ice coursed through me. I thought of the stories from the ranger about people vanishing in those woods, lost souls perhaps echoing through time. "What bad man?" He looked over his shoulder as if fearing a shadow would follow. "He's in the woods. He tries to catch me." I felt sick. This wasn't just a boy lost in my house. This was a piece of the dark mystery I was trying to understand. "Can you tell me what happened?" I asked, my voice calmer now. I needed answers. "Where were you before you came here?" He hesitated, twisting the stuffed animal in his hands. "I was at the stones, and then I saw... him." "Who?" "Sir, he's not a man. He looks like smoke and shadows. He wanted me to come with him." The boy took a shaky breath. That's when I ran. I felt an unsettling chill crawl down my spine. A dark figure in the woods, the very image that haunted my thoughts since our encounter. "Stay here," I commanded gently, not sure what else to say. I needed to process this. As I moved towards the door, I glanced back at the boy, but I couldn't shake a feeling deep in my gut. It wasn't over. Whatever chased him was still out there, watching, waiting. Then I heard a rustling sound outside my front door. It was different, heavier. Someone, or something, was approaching. My heart raced. I turned back to the boy. "Don't move," I whispered, and I crept to the door, knife ready. My pulse quickened, the implications crashing around in my mind. Was this a warning, or was it drawing me back into the forest? I didn't know if I was prepared for what awaited me next. I pressed my ear against the door, trying to hear more. The rustling stopped, replaced by a low, eerie silence that settled like fog. I could feel my heart racing, anxiety clawing at my throat. I glanced back at the boy, his wide eyes filled with fear mirroring my own. "Stay behind me," I whispered, trying to sound more confident than I felt. I took a deep breath and turned the knob, slowly pushing the door open. It creaked as if protesting my actions. The cool night air rushed in, carrying a hint of something unpleasant, like damp earth and decay. Instinctively, I tightened my grip on the knife. Outside, the world was cloaked in darkness. My porch light barely illuminated the steps ahead. I stepped outside, scanning the yard. Nothing, just the rustling of leaves in the wind. Then, I caught a glimpse of movement out of the corner of my eye, a shadow darting between the trees lining my property. "Hello?" I called out, keeping my tone steady. Silence answered me, taut and heavy. My heart raced as I fought the urge to retreat. The boy's soft whimper reminded me of his presence behind me. "Take a deep breath," I said, trying to reassure both of us. "It's okay, we're safe." But as the words left my mouth, the movement returned, only this time it was closer, more pronounced. I gripped the knife tighter, taking a cautious step forward. "Come out where I can see you." A figure stepped into the faint light, a man, but not just any man. He was tall, his form almost obscured by the shadows that clung to him like a second skin. I felt a chill creep over me, teeth gritting in instinctual rage and terror. "Help me!" he rasped, the two words holding a weight I couldn't understand. "Who are you?" I demanded, my voice trembling despite my earlier resolve. "What do you want?" "I'm trapped," he said, voice low and gravelly. "I need your help." His eyes glinted in the darkness, but they looked wrong, devoid of warmth. A chill ran down my spine, and I took a step back, instinct kicking in. "Stay away!" I shouted, panic bubbling over. The boy gasped behind me, and I felt a rush of protectiveness. I couldn't let this thing, whatever it was, get near him. "Please," the figure said, his tone desperate. "You don't understand. The woods. They're alive. They will consume you." I could hardly process the madness of his statement, hardly comprehend what it meant. "You're lying! What happened to the boy?" "Do you think he's safe here?" The shadow shifted slightly, revealing a hint of a grin, a smile that sent my heart plummeting. "He wants you to join him." Before I could respond, the boy tugged my shirt. "We need to go, now." I felt the tug of the woods calling out, a dangerously enticing whisper whispering that I should trust the man, but I couldn't. I couldn't let this thing have the boy. I grabbed his hand and pulled him toward the door. But as I turned, the air thickened, and suddenly the porch light flickered, casting long shadows that twisted like fingers towards us. "Don't let him go!" the shadow figure shouted, and I felt something brush against my ankle, a frigid pulse that felt alive. In one quick movement, I slammed the door shut behind us. I locked it and turned to face the boy, his small frame trembling next to me. "What was that?" I gasped, dread pooling in my stomach. He looked up at me, eyes wide with fear. "The bad man," he whispered. "He wants to take us." A shiver ran down my spine. We weren't safe yet. This was just the beginning. I took a moment to catch my breath, adrenaline still coursing through my veins. The boy's eyes darted toward the door, and I realized we couldn't just stand there. Whatever was outside could find a way in, even through the flimsy wooden barrier we had just closed. "Okay," I said, my voice steadier now. "We need a plan." I glanced around the dimly lit room. The furniture was sparse and the windows thick with dust. Only the shadows stirred. I pushed aside the creeping sense of dread that threatened to swallow me whole. "We need to find a phone, or at least a flashlight." "Upstairs," the boy whispered, pointing towards the rickety staircase in the corner. I nodded. We had to stay together. "Come on, stick close to me." We crept over to the stairs, making sure not to make any noise. My mind raced with questions. Who was that man? What did he mean by the woods being alive? More importantly, why did he look like a predator? My grip tightened on the knife, a small comfort against the growing darkness of my thoughts. As we ascended the stairs, the wood creaked and groaned beneath us. Each step felt like an eternity. The boy looked up at me, his fear palpable. "Do you think he'll come in?" "I won't let him," I promised, though inside I was unsure. At the top of the staircase, we found a hallway that seemed to stretch on forever. Each door was just as ominous as the last. The shadows loomed larger than life, creating shapes that made my skin crawl. I took the first door on the left, relieved to find an old room, musty and untouched. I quickly scanned the small space, eyes darting around. "Look!" The boy pointed to a desk in the corner, covered in thick dust. A lamp lay there along with a rotary phone. I rushed over, dread replaced by a glimmer of hope. "Can you plug the lamp in?" I asked. He nodded, eager to help, and hurried to the outlet. As he fumbled with the cord, something from the hallway caught my eye. A flicker of movement, like a dark cloak slipping away. "Stay close," I hissed, my heart racing faster than ever. The boy finished plugging in the lamp, and it flickered to life, but only for a split second before dying. I cursed under my breath, fighting the surge of panic rising in my throat. "Can you check the phone?" He nodded again, trembling but determined. I held the knife close, ready to defend us against whatever came next. As he picked up the receiver, I peered into the hallway, looking for any sign of that man. "Nothing. It's dead," he said, disappointment creeping into his voice. Then, out of nowhere, I heard it. A low growl coming from the stairs. My instincts flared. "Get back!" I shouted, pulling the boy behind me as the sound echoed into a chilling silence. The shadows shifted in the hallway, pushing farther into the room as if they were alive, closing in around us. "We need to find another way out," I said, adrenaline surging. I rushed to the door at the end of the hallway, hoping that it would lead us to safety. That's when I saw it. A glimmer of eyes watching us from the other side, glowing faintly, reflecting the fleeting light. My stomach dropped. "I don't want to go back there," the boy cried quietly, trembling against my side. "We'll figure something out," I murmured, trying to keep my voice steady, though fear clawed at me from the inside. But now we had to confront the truth. I didn't know what waited for us, and I could feel the forest closing in around us, a living thing hungry for company. I had only a moment to gather my thoughts before the faint growl came again, closer this time. Panic rushed over me like icy water. "We need to move. Now." I pushed open the door at the end of the hallway, praying for a way out. The old hinges protested in a haunting creak, and I peered into the dim room. It was far larger than I expected, filled with shadowy furniture and the unmistakable scent of mold. "Where should we go?" the boy whispered, his voice trembling like a fragile leaf. "Let's find another way down." My mind raced. The growl echoed in my ears, sending chills down my spine. I motioned for the boy to follow as I stepped cautiously into the room. The air felt heavier here, as if it was thick with secrets. I scanned the walls for a second exit. Just then, I saw an outline of a window, but it was barred. Great, just what we needed. As my frustration mounted, I turned back to the boy. "Let's check the other side." Together we moved across the room, stepping lightly on the creaking floorboards. The shadows danced around us, growing restless. I felt a weight in the air, pushing against my chest. It was as if the house itself disapproved of our presence. Suddenly, a loud crash rang out from downstairs. My heart leaped into my throat. "What was that?" I gasped, wide-eyed. The boy looked frightened, his small body trembling like a deer caught in the headlights. "I don't know," he stammered. "Maybe it was him." The growl came again, much closer. I had to fight panic. "Stay behind me," I told the boy, my voice slightly firmer, masking the terror swirling within me. We quickly approached the barred window, searching for any weak points. My heart sank as I noticed an old rusted latch hanging loosely on the side. I pulled at it, but it wouldn't budge. The noise from downstairs grew louder, urgency pushing me to act faster. Then I spotted something glinting in the corner, half hidden under a pile of debris. I knelt down, pulling a rusted wrench from beneath the dust. This could work. I turned back to the window, ready to force it open. "Are we going to get out?" the boy asked, anxiety lacing his voice. "Yes, just keep an eye on the door," I replied, feeling a flicker of determination. With a swift motion, I smashed the wrench against the latch. It broke free, clinking to the floor. I pulled down on the window, my palms sweaty. It opened with an eerie squeal, releasing a gust of stale air that chilled me to my core. "Help me!" I urged the boy, and together we pried the window wider. A surge of hope lifted me as I leaned out, searching for any semblance of safety. But in the shadows of the trees beyond the window, I could see them, the glimmering eyes of something watching, waiting. "Get down!" I shouted as a dark shape flitted past, just out of sight. The boy scrambled beside me as I pushed the window shut. "We have to leave now!" I gripped his arm, terror flooding my senses. But which way? Everything felt distorted. I couldn't help but think of the words that man had spoken. The woods are alive. My pulse quickened again, the forest echoing back my fears. Then, above the rattling of my breath, I heard a whisper, low and guttural. "You shouldn't have come here." I froze. The voice slipped through the air like smoke, wrapping itself around my throat. I glanced at the boy, who looked up at me with wide eyes filled with fear. "Something is in the house," I said, realization hitting me hard. There was no other option. We were going to have to face it. But would either of us be ready for what awaited us? I stood there, frozen, the weight of the whisper hanging between us like a shroud. The boy's grip tightened on my arm, his small fingers trembling. I felt my heart racing, pushing raw panic through my body. "We have to keep moving," I insisted, forcing my legs to budge. "There has to be another way out." We retreated into the dim light of the room, casting wary glances at the door as if it might suddenly burst open. I led the way towards the far corner, where a murky silhouette loomed. It was a door, smaller than the rest. Maybe it led to the outside. With each step, the ominous growl loomed larger in my thoughts. As I reached for the handle, I hesitated. The house felt alive, its very walls whispering secrets of the darkness inside. I pulled the door open, nerves crackling in the air around us. It creaked eerily, revealing a narrow staircase spiraling into shadows below. "Do we have to go down there?" the boy asked, his voice trembling. I nodded slowly, my instincts screaming to flee. "It might lead to the basement, maybe even outside. We need to take that risk." I squeezed his hand. We descended together, each step echoing with uncertainty. The air grew colder, more stifling. I kept my gaze fixed on the darkness ahead. Then I noticed it. A faint glow at the bottom of the stairs. It flickered like a candle, enticing yet foreboding. "What is that?" I breathed, my voice barely above a whisper. "I don't know," the boy replied, his eyes widening. He moved a little closer, fighting against the pull of fear. As we reached the bottom, I felt something shift in the air. The flickering light revealed a small room lined with shelves filled with dust-covered jars. My breath caught in my throat as I realized what they contained. Strange, murky liquids swirling inside, remnants of something I couldn't comprehend. "What are those?" the boy asked, his curiosity mixed with fear. I shook my head. "I don't know, but we shouldn't touch anything." My voice was sharper than I intended, and I could see him flinch. I felt guilt wash over me, but the feeling of being watched pressed down on us. I turned back to the faint light and moved closer. In the center of the room sat a table draped with a tattered cloth. As I reached for it, I caught a glimpse of something on the floor. It was a notebook, weathered and crumbling, lying under the table. My heart pounded as I picked it up. "That could help us," I whispered, flipping it open. The pages were filled with frantic notes, sketches of creatures I couldn't recognize, and warnings scrawled in jagged handwriting. "They're trapped," I read aloud. "They know the woods. They protect it." Then another growl resonated, deeper and more unsettling than before. It vibrated through the room, pushing us to our limits. This was no longer just about escape. It felt as if we were at the heart of something much darker. "Run!" I shouted, heart racing as I clutched the notebook to my chest. I grabbed the boy's hand tightly, pulling him with me back to the staircase. Above the din of fear and pounding hearts, I could almost hear the whispers again, clawing at the edges of my sanity, telling me that whatever lived in this house was eager for company. Just as we reached the stairs, an icy wind hit us, snuffling out the flickering light behind us. The cold darkness surged closer, and I had a feeling that whatever was here wasn't going to let us leave that easily. What had we stumbled into? I pushed the boy ahead of me, shoving the door open. I felt eyes on us, a presence that clawed at the edges of my vision. I didn't look back. I just ran, the air filled with that insistent growl, the warnings from the notebook replaying in my mind like a grim chant. There was no telling what was waiting for us on the other side of the doorway. Would we make it out before it was too late? We burst through the door and into a dimly lit hallway. The air was thick, almost suffocating, and I could feel a weight pressing down on my chest. The growl echoed again, vibrating through the walls. I didn't know whether to run or freeze. "Where do we go?" the boy asked, his voice trembling as he looked around. His grip on my hand was tight, and I could feel his fear blending with mine. I spotted another door at the far end of the hallway. It looked just as old and worn as the others we'd seen. "We can try that one," I said, hoping my voice sounded more confident than I felt. As we moved forward, I noticed the walls were covered in strange symbols, painted in dark colors that resembled shadows lurking just out of sight. I couldn't make out the words, but they sent a chill down my spine. Whatever these markings were, they felt like a warning. We reached the door, and I pulled the handle. It creaked open slowly, revealing a room filled with even more jars, but these were larger, and many of them were shattered on the floor. The shards glimmered in the low light, like teeth waiting to bite. "Maybe we should go back," the boy whispered, but I could see a flicker of determination in his eyes. "Just a little further," I urged, stepping over the broken glass. The unsettling growls were growing louder, closer. Each footstep felt heavier, more deliberate, as if something was tracking us. In the center of the room stood a strange altar. It was made from rough stones, each one etched with the same ominous symbols I'd seen on the walls. And there, in the center, was a small figure wrapped in what appeared to be ragged cloth. I felt my heart drop. "What is that?" the boy asked, eyes wide with both fear and curiosity. I was too afraid to approach it. "I don't know, but it doesn't look friendly," I managed, trying to keep my voice steady. The growl erupted again, louder this time. It felt like it was right behind us. Panic surged through me, and I turned back to the hallway, pulling the boy with me. "We need to leave, now!" But as we moved, a shadow darted across the wall, blocking our path. It was quick and fluid, like a predator toying with its prey. I froze, heart racing, as I struggled to understand what I was seeing. "Follow me!" I yelled, bolting toward a different door that had just come into view. I pushed it open with all my strength, not caring if it led us deeper into danger. Outside, moonlight spilled into the dark room, illuminating dusty furniture and peeling wallpaper. Relief washed over me as I stepped through, but it was short-lived. The growl transformed into something nearly human, like a chant or a call. "What are we doing?" the boy asked, panic creeping into his voice. Then I saw it. A figure stood at the end of the room, outlined by the moonlight. It was tall and shadowy, with elongated limbs, watching us intently. My instincts screamed at me to run again, but my legs felt like lead. Before I could react, the figure raised an arm, slowly, and pointed directly at us. My stomach twisted with dread. I didn't know what it wanted, but it was clear we were not welcome. That's when I saw it. A flicker of movement just behind the figure, barely noticeable. It was another shadow, smaller and more sinister. As I turned to grab the boy's hand, I realized we weren't just being watched. We were surrounded. I knew we had to move, but every instinct told me we were trapped. Suddenly, the walls began to close in, and I felt the very essence of the house urging us to stay. "Run!" I screamed, and I launched myself toward the exit, hoping the boy would follow. We had to escape whatever was converging on us, whatever was waiting in the darkness. We darted back through the door, hearts pounding in sync. I could feel the shadows closing in behind us, pressing tighter than a vice. The boy stayed close, eyes wide with terror, as we sprinted down the hall, the growl morphing into a ghastly cacophony echoing off the walls. I had to keep going. There was no time to think. "Is it getting closer?" he gasped, as we stumbled into yet another dimly lit room. I didn't answer. The fearful thrum of my heart drowned out all logic. In front of us, the floor was littered with debris from the jars that had been scattered everywhere. I barely noticed the glint of glass beneath our feet as I pulled the boy ahead, avoiding the treacherous shards. We dashed to the next door I spotted, but it was stuck, refusing to budge. Panic surged again. "Come on!" I pulled harder, adrenaline giving me the strength to shove the heavy door until it finally creaked open. A rush of frigid air slammed into us like an unseen wall. Beyond the door lay a small, windowless room, its only light filtering through a dirty, cracked skylight above. A strange mist clung to the air, swirling around our legs. I could see outlines in the haze, shadows flickering just beyond perception. "Where do we go now?" the boy asked, voice trembling. I covered my mouth with a hand, stifling my own rising fear. I didn't have a plan anymore. I had hoped to find an exit or a route to safety, but every option felt like a trap. I swept the room for another door or window, when suddenly a low, rumbling growl echoed again, louder than ever. My blood froze at the sound, and I suddenly felt the weight of the house pressing down on me. The whispering intensified, creeping under my skin. "Look!" the boy shouted, pointing to the far wall where a strange symbol flickered alive in the mist, glowing with an unsettling energy. It began to pulse rhythmically, resonating with my heartbeat. Without thinking, I moved towards it. Perhaps this was the source of the energy, a way to break free from whatever had locked us in this nightmare. But as I stepped closer, the very air around us seemed to quiver violently. The shadows danced, shifting and curling around me. "Don't!" the boy yelled, pulling on my arm, but it was too late. I was entranced, feeling the pulsing energy coursing through my veins. It was as if something was calling out to me, promising answers. I hesitated, sensing the boy's fear, weighing my instincts against an insatiable curiosity. As I approached the symbol, the shadows coalesced, screaming through the air with a sound that rumbled through the house. I began to doubt my choice, a feeling of dread swirling up from my gut. "What do you want from us?" I shouted desperately into the mist, hoping for some sign of clarity amidst the chaos. The growl turned into a distorted voice that made my skin crawl. "You disturb the balance." "Balance? What balance?" I dared to ask, but with every word I spoke, the shadows roared louder, shaking the room violently. They lunged at us like a tide, dark tendrils reaching out as if to ensnare us. "Run!" I pulled the boy towards the door, panic setting in. We sprinted back through the door, just as it seemed the shadows were about to engulf us. The growl morphed into an unearthly scream that chased us through the halls of the house, giving us no mercy. We darted past darkened rooms, our screams swallowed by the walls that seemed to close in tighter with each step. "Where are we?" the boy cried, terror etched across his face. "I don't know!" I shouted back, desperation coloring my voice. All of the confidence I'd had moments ago folded into uncertainty. The house felt like a maze, alive and pulsating, oppressive shadows lurking at every turn. Just as we nearly collapsed from exhaustion, I spotted a flicker of light in the distance. a glimmer of hope. "Over there!" I shouted, pulling the boy toward the brightness. We raced toward it, bursting through a final door, and there it was. A set of double doors flooded with ethereal light, bright enough to chase the shadows away. My heart soared, renewing my spirit as we charged through. The light enveloped us, warming our bodies as the energy of the house began to shrink back. The whispers faded. The shadows receded, revealing. We emerged into a clearing, a small pocket of forest that felt strangely familiar. The air was fresher, the trees vibrant under the sunlight. The hooded figures and their wild whispers were gone. Had it all been a nightmare? The boy looked around in awe, realizing we were home. "Are we safe?" he asked, his voice trembling. I turned back, glancing at the house looming behind us, dark and silent, but imbued with a brooding intensity, a lingering sense of unfinished business. "For now," I replied cautiously. But as we stepped away, a chill ran through me, and I couldn't shake the feeling that whatever had taken residence within those walls wasn't gone. I didn't know how we had escaped, nor did I understand what we had encountered. All I knew was that the woods had shared their dark secrets with us, and some threads of that reality remained woven into the fabric of the lives we would lead now. "Let's go," I urged, gripping the boy's hand tightly as we walked away from the darkness, both of us wondering if the woods would ever stop watching.